Chapter 1: The Hour Before Dark. The wind is warm, that is the first thing. Before anything else, before you understand where you are or how you came to be here, there is the wind on your skin, and it is warm, warm the way no wind is warm in the north. A steady breathing warmth that comes from somewhere far behind you and never quite stops. It moves across the back of your neck. It lifts the loose linen of your shirt where the sweat has dried it to your skin. And it carries a smell that you have come to know better than the smell of any house you ever lived in: salt and tar and wet rope and the long green breath of the open sea. You are on the water. You can feel that before you can see it. You feel it in the slow rise and fall beneath your feet, a long swell lifting you and setting you down again, lifting and setting down, patient as breathing, so familiar now that your body has stopped fighting it and learned instead to ride it, to bend with it, to let your knees go soft and your weight shift from foot to foot without your ever thinking about it at all. The deck breathes. The whole world breathes. And you breathe with it. The light is going. To the west, where the sun has begun its long fall toward the rim of the sea, the sky has turned to copper and rose, a great burning spread of color laid flat across the water, and the water has taken the color up and given it back, so that for this 1 hour the whole ocean is the color of fire, and the color of fruit, and the color of old worn gold. The sun is enormous here at the end of the day. It is not the small, hard sun of cold countries. It is a wide, low furnace settling toward the horizon, and you can almost look at it now in these last minutes as it loses its strength and sinks, and the color deepens, and somewhere a man begins very quietly to sing. You do not know all the words. It is an old song, a slow one, the kind of song a man sings half to himself while his hands are busy with rope. And his hands are busy. There is always rope. You look along the deck and you see him there near the foot of the mast, coiling a line down into a neat flat spiral, his fingers moving without his eyes, his voice low under the wind, and you do not call out to him, and he does not call to you, and that is right. This is the quiet hour. This is the hour before dark, and everyone aboard knows it, and everyone has softened toward it. Now, let me tell you where you are. You are aboard a sloop. A small ship, small if you have ever stood beside one of the king's great ships of the line, with their 3 towering masts and their 100 guns and their crews of 600 souls. This is nothing like that. This is a single-masted vessel, perhaps 60 feet from her sharp bow to the round of her stern, narrow and low and fast, built to slide across shallow water where the heavy ships cannot follow. 1 mast, 1 great spread of canvas fore and aft that the wind takes and holds. And under your feet, perhaps 40 men, not 600, 40. You could learn every one of their names, and you have. She is quick, this ship. That is her whole nature, the thing she was made for, and the thing the men aboard her chose her for. She can run with the wind at better than 10 knots when the sea is kind, faster than almost anything that might come hunting her, and she draws so little water beneath her keel that she can flee into the shallows, into the maze of low sandy islands and hidden inlets that lie scattered across these waters, where any ship large enough to threaten her would tear her bottom open on the reef. Speed and shallow water. Those are her 2 gifts. Those are the 2 things that keep the men aboard her alive. And the men aboard her are pirates. Say the word and let it sit a moment in the warm dark. Pirate. It is a word that has gathered to itself, over the long years, A whole world of imagining flags and swords and buried gold, parrots and wooden legs and growled threats. Set all of that down for now. Let it drift off the stern and sink behind you in the wake. The men around you in this failing light are not the pirates of story. They are something stranger and quieter and far more real. They are sailors. Most of them sailed honest ships once, merchant ships or the king's ships, and most of them ran from something, from a captain's lash, from a war that ended and left them with no work, from a life that offered them nothing but hardship and obedience and an early grave. And they came here to this small, fast ship on the warm sea, and they made a different kind of life. You will come to understand what kind. We have all night. The year, if you want to hold a year in your mind, is somewhere around 1715. The place is the Caribbean, that warm green sea scattered with islands that lies south and east of the great new lands of the Americas, north of the coast of the Main. Somewhere to the north and west of you lies a low sandy island called New Providence, and a town upon it called Nassau, which is the nearest thing these men have to a home. You will hear more of Nassau before the night is through. But for now it is only a memory and a direction, a place over the dark edge of the water, and you are here, out on the swell, under the dying light, with the warm wind on your neck. A bell sounds, not loud. A single clear stroke of bronze from somewhere near the stern, and then a second, the two notes close together, and then silence again. It is the ship's bell, and it is marking the time, as it has marked the time all day and will mark it all night, dividing the long hours into watches the way a knife divides bread. You have learned to half hear it, the way you half hear your own heartbeat. The men aboard live by that bell. It tells them when to wake and when to sleep, when to climb to the masthead and when to come down when the long night is ending. You will hear it again and again before the sun comes back. The singer has stopped singing. He has finished his coil of rope, and he straightens, and he presses a hand to the small of his back, and he looks west at the last of the burning light, with a face you cannot quite read, tired, perhaps, and perhaps content, in the way of a man whose work for the day is nearly done. The sun touches the sea. For a moment it sits there on the very edge of the world, flattened and trembling, too bright still to look at directly, laying a long road of fire straight across the water toward the ship, toward you, as if you could step off the bow and walk west along it forever. And then it begins to sink in earnest, faster now, the way it always seems to go faster at the very end, and the road of fire shortens and shortens, and the color climbs up out of the water into the sky, and the first cool of evening comes sliding in behind the warmth, and the day, the long bright day, lets go. Stay here with me, out on the deck in the last of the light, in the warm wind. There is a whole night ahead of us, dusk to dawn, and there is no hurry in any of it. The dark is coming on slow and kind across the water, and we will meet it together, you and I will show you everything, the ship, the men, the rules they live by, the strange free world they built out here on the edge of the maps. Let the day go. Let the color fade. There is nothing to do now but watch the light leave the water and breathe and let yourself settle the way the men around you are settling into the long warm dark of a night at sea. Before we travel any further, if you are finding this peaceful, if this is helping you settle and rest, it would mean a great deal to me if you subscribed to the channel and left a like. It takes only a moment, and it helps this channel continue making these videos. And please write something in the comments. Tell me where you are in the world right now and what time it is where you are. I am always genuinely curious. Write it in the comments when you have a moment. Now, let us continue. Chapter 2. The Shape of the Ship. Lay your hand flat on the wood. Go on. Find the rail beside you in the gathering dark, the smooth, worn top of it, and rest your palm there and feel it. It is warm still from the day's sun, and it is smooth, smoother than any rail was ever made smooth by a carpenter's plane. It is the hands that did this. Years of hands. 1,000 passages of rough sailors' palms sliding along this same rail, day and night, in fair weather and foul, until the grain of the wood has been polished down to something almost soft, almost like skin. You could close your eyes and read this ship with your hands alone, the way a blind man reads a face, and you would find everywhere the same thing, wood worn smooth by use, rope worn soft by gripping, the whole vessel shaped and gentled by the men who live upon her. Feel her move under you now, that long roll. She is alive in a way the great ships are not, light enough that every swell speaks through her, every gust of the warm wind tilts her and is answered, so that to stand on her deck is to be in constant quiet conversation with the sea. The big ships ride heavy and proud and slow. This one dances, and that dancing is the whole point of her. Let me show you her shape, here in the dark, by feel and by memory, the way you have come to know her. She has one mast. It rises from the deck a little forward of her middle, a single tall spar of pine, and you can see it now as a black line against the last gray of the western sky, and the stars are beginning to come out behind it. From that mast hangs her canvas, not the squared-off sails of the king's ships, set across the line of the hull, but long sails set fore and aft, running the length of her, so that she can sail close into the wind, can claw her way up toward the very direction the wind is coming from, can turn and slip and double back in a way the square-rigged ships can only envy. This is why pirates love a sloop. She goes where they point her. She does not fight them. Below the deck where you stand there is one long low space, the hold, and that is where the men sleep, and where the stores are kept, and where you will go later when the bell rings for the lights to go out. Toward the stern there is a small cabin, the only enclosed room aboard, and that is where the captain keeps his charts and his instruments, and what little he owns that the sea would spoil. Everywhere else is open deck and rigging, and the great curved walls of her sides rising up to the rail, and the guns. There are guns. You should know that, even on this quiet night. A sloop like this might carry 8 or 10 of them, small iron cannon lashed in their carriages along the sides, their muzzles run back and their ports closed for now, sleeping. And there are smaller guns too, swivel guns mounted at the rail, the kind a man can turn and aim by hand. She is not a warship. She could not stand for 10 minutes against one of the king's frigates in open water. But she is not meant to stand and fight. She is meant to frighten and to chase, and above all to flee, and her guns are mostly there to make a merchant captain think twice before he risks his cargo and his life resisting. She was not built to be what she is now. Almost no pirate ship was. Somewhere in her past, she was an honest vessel, a trader, perhaps, carrying sugar or logwood or hides between the islands and the colonies, owned by some merchant in a far-off port, sailed by an honest crew. And then one day, on some bright morning on the open sea, another ship came up over the horizon, faster than she was, and ran out a flag that was not the flag of any nation. And that was the end of her old life. She was taken, and the men who took her looked her over and judged her quick and sound and shallow of draught, and decided to keep her for themselves. they gave her a new name. They almost always gave the captured ship a new name, something fierce, or something defiant, a revenge or a fortune or a ranger, a name that said what the new men aboard her thought of the world that had cast them out. So she carries two lives in her timbers, this ship. The honest life she was born to, and the outlaw life she lives now, and the men who sail her are the same, each one of them carrying an old life and a new one, an honest name from somewhere far away, and the harder name the sea has given him. Run your hand along the rail again. Feel the warmth still in it. There is iron somewhere near, and you can smell it faintly under the salt, the iron of the guns, the iron of the rings and bolts that hold the rigging fast. And there is tar, always tar, black and sticky and pungent, smeared over every rope and seemed to keep the sea out. The smell of it so woven into the life of the ship that you have stopped noticing it except in moments like this, when you go looking for it. Tar and salt and warm wood, and far off the green smell of the sea itself. This is the smell of your world now. You could find this ship in the dark by smell alone. She is 60 feet, perhaps. 60 feet from the point of her bow to the round of her stern, 40 paces, if you walked her slow from end to end, which you have many times on quiet watches in the night. 40 paces, that is the whole of your world. That is the entire kingdom of these 40 men, this little floating country 60 feet long, with the open sea on every side stretching away farther than any of you will ever see. It is a small place to hold a whole life, and yet a life is held here, and more than a life, a kind of nation, with its own laws and its own customs and its own strange justice, all of it contained in these 60 feet of wood, riding the dark swell under the coming stars. Stand a while longer at the rail. Let your hand stay on the warm, worn wood. Below you, the water slides past the hull with a soft, continuous hiss, a sound like a long whisper that never finishes, and the ship lifts and settles, and the mast traces its slow circle against the stars. There is nothing you need to do. The ship knows her work. The wind knows its work. You have only to stand here in the warm dark and feel the whole of this small wooden world breathing beneath your hand, carrying you on through the night across a sea you cannot see, toward a morning that is still many long, slow, peaceful hours away. Chapter 3: The Men in the Dark. Listen not to anything in particular. Just listen the way you can only listen at sea once the sun is gone and the work has eased, to the layered quiet of a ship at the end of the day. The hiss of water along the hull, low and unending. The creak of the rigging as the wind leans on it. The small knock of a block against the mast. And under all of it, voices. Low voices here and there about the deck, men talking quietly in the dark the way men do when the day's labor is behind them and there is nothing left to do but wait for sleep. These are your shipmates. Let me tell you who they are, here in the dark where you cannot quite see their faces, because the dark is the right place to tell it. By daylight you see only what a man does, the way he hauls a line, the way he stands a watch. In the dark, talking low, you hear what a man was. And every man aboard this ship was something else before he was this. That voice nearest you, the older one, dry and slow, he was a king's man once. Pressed, he will tell you, if you ask him on the right night. Taken off the street of an English port by the press gang, by men with clubs who needed hands for a warship and did not much care whose hands they were, and carried off to sea against his will to serve a king he had never seen, under officers who flogged a man bloody for the smallest fault. Years of that, the hard biscuit and the harder discipline, the cat-o'-nine-tails and the cold and the endless fear of the lash. And then one day a chance, a ship taken, a choice offered, a flag run up, and he took it, and he has never once been sorry. He sleeps easier as an outlaw, he says, than he ever slept as an honest man in the king's own navy. Think on that when you think of these men. That other voice, younger, with the soft burr of the West Country in it, he jumped ship. A merchant sailor on an honest trader, worked half to death by a captain who fed his crew on rotten meat and weevil biscuit, and pocketed the difference, who beat them and cheated them of their wages, and knew that the law would always take his side against theirs, because the law was made by men like him. And the young man could not bear it, and at some island port he slipped over the side in the night and swam for the dark line of the shore, and made his way to a place where men like these would have him, and here he is. Free, hungry sometimes, and often afraid, but free, and his own master, with a vote in his own affairs, which is more than he ever had as an honest man. And there are others. There is the man who was a privateer, who sailed with a paper from his king in the great war that ran for years across these seas, a war over which prince should sit on the throne of Spain. With that paper he was a hero. He could take Spanish ships and Spanish gold, and it was lawful, it was patriotic. The king's own commission hung about his neck. And then the war ended. 2 years ago now, the kings and the queens signed their treaty far away in Europe, and overnight the paper meant nothing, and the man who had been a hero was told to go home and be poor and quiet and grateful. Thousands of men like him were cast loose that year, skilled fighting sailors with no war to fight and no work to do, and a hard-learned taste for taking what the sea offered. Many of them came here. The end of that war made more pirates than any other thing in the world. And there are men aboard who came to freedom by a far harder road than any of these. There is a man near the foot of the mast, broad-shouldered, quiet, who was carried across the great ocean in chains in the belly of a slave ship, packed in the dark with hundreds of others, sold or meant to be sold like an animal at the far end of that terrible passage. And somewhere along the way, in a port on a beach, in the confusion of a ship taken at sea, he got free, and he found his way here to this ship, where a man's worth is reckoned by his skill and his courage and his share of the vote, and not by the color of his skin or the place of his birth. It is not a perfect freedom. Nothing about this world is perfect or clean. But on this small ship, on a good night, he is a man among men, with a voice and a share and a name, and that is more than the wide, lawful world beyond the water would ever willingly give him. This is the crew. 40 men, more or less, gathered out of the wreckage of a dozen hard lives. They are not heroes. Do not make them into heroes in your mind. Some of them have done cruel things, and most of them have done desperate ones, and the life they have chosen ends, for very many who choose it, with a rope at the end of a short drop on a colonial dock. They know that. Every man aboard knows the shape of his likely end and has made his peace with it, or pretends he has. But they are not monsters either, whatever the broadsheets in the far-off cities say of them. They are men. Tired men, mostly in their 20s and 30s, weathered brown by the sun, by the work and the fighting, who wanted something the ordinary world would not give them and came out here to the warm, dark sea to take it. What they wanted, most of them, was a strange and simple thing. They wanted to belong to themselves, to not be owned, not be pressed, not be flogged at another man's pleasure, to have a say. And so they built, out here beyond the reach of any king, a life in which they did have a say, in which the lowest man aboard had a vote equal to the captain's, and the rules were written down and sworn to by all, and no man could be cheated of his share. It is a rough life and a short one and often a bloody one, but it is theirs. And as the dark comes down and the voices murmur on across the deck, you can feel that the deep contentment of men who have, at whatever cost, made themselves free. The talking is fading now. One by one, the low voices fall quiet as men drift toward sleep or toward the next watch. Somewhere forward, someone laughs softly at something, and another man answers, and then they too go still. The ship sails on through the warm dark, carrying her 40 free and broken and unrepentant men through the night, and you among them now, one more soul who came to the edge of the world looking for something the world would not give, and found, at least, this: the warm wind, the open sea, the quiet company of men who chose their own way, and the long, peaceful dark before sleep. Chapter 4: The Articles. There is a paper folded somewhere in the captain's cabin, and every man aboard has touched it. You touched it yourself the day you joined. You remember the weight of the moment, though there was nothing grand about the setting: a low cabin, a swinging lamp, a sheet of paper laid on a sea chest, and the quartermaster watching you with steady eyes. And you put your hand on it, and you swore. Some ships swear the oath on a Bible. Some, lacking a Bible or caring nothing for one, swear it on a boarding axe laid crossways, or on a pair of crossed pistols, or simply on the paper itself. But every man swears. Before a single voyage begins, before the ship will sail to take so much as a fishing boat, every man aboard must set his hand to the articles and swear to live by them. And once he has sworn, he is bound, not by any law of any king, for the kings would hang him gladly, but by the only law there is out here, which is the law these men made for themselves and agreed upon together. Lie back now, if you are not already lying back. Let your body sink into wherever you are resting, and let me read you the articles, the way they might be read aloud on the deck before a voyage, with the crew gathered round in the lamplight to hear the rules of their own small nation spoken over them one more time. These were the rules of a real captain, a Welshman named Roberts, the most successful of all of them, whose articles were written down and have come down to us across the centuries. Listen, they are a strange and beautiful thing to hear in the dark. The first article: every man has a vote in the affairs of the moment. Every man has an equal right to the fresh provisions and the strong drink that are taken, and may use them as he pleases, unless a shortage makes it needful for the common good to vote a rationing. Hold that first article in your mind a while. Every man has a vote. In the year 1715, in a world of kings and lords and masters, where the ordinary man had no say in anything that ruled his life, out here on this outlaw ship, the very first rule is that every man shall have a vote. They wrote down democracy on a sheet of paper in a ship's cabin, 100 years before the wide world caught up to them, not because they had read it in any book, but because they had lived under tyranny and would not live under it again. The second article: every man shall be called fairly in turn to his share of the prizes taken, for it is the custom that all share alike. But if any man defraud the company of so much as a single piece of 8, the punishment is marooning, to be set ashore alone on some barren island with a bottle of water and a pistol with a single shot, and left. The crew that shares everything will not forgive the man who steals from it. The rule is simple, and the men keep it, because the whole fragile life of the ship depends upon every man trusting that he will get his fair share. The third, no person shall play at cards or dice for money. There shall be no gambling aboard. You might think pirates would gamble night and day, and perhaps you imagine them so. But they had learned, these men, what gambling does to a small crew on a long voyage, the debts, the grudges, the quarrels that fester in the dark, and so they forbade it. A pirate ship was, in its way, a careful and a sober place. The fourth, the lights and the candles shall be put out at 8 o'clock at night, and if any of the crew desire to go on drinking after that hour, they shall do it on the open deck. Remember that one. It will matter to you very soon. 8 o'clock, and the lights go out below and the ship goes dark, and any man who wants his rum after that must take it up into the night air under the stars. We are not far from 8 o'clock now. The fifth. Every man shall keep his weapons clean and ready for service at all times. A pistol, a cutlass, kept clean, kept ready. For the ship lives by the threat of force, and a fouled weapon is a dead man's weapon, and the whole company depends on every man being ready when the moment comes. The sixth, no woman shall be brought aboard in disguise, and no boy. To bring a woman aboard, the article says, under penalty of death. Hold that one lightly. It sounds harsh, and it was harsh, but its purpose was plain enough to the men who swore it. 40 armed men crowded onto 60 feet of wood. Jealousy is a spark in a powder room, and the rule was meant to keep the peace among men who had little else to fight over. We will speak later in the night of 2 women who sailed these seas anyway, and fought better than the men around them. But the rule stood on most ships, and it stood for a reason these men understood in their bones. The seventh. Any man who deserts the ship or his post in battle shall be marooned or shot. In the moment of danger, when the iron is flying, every man must hold his place, because every man's life is in the hands of the man beside him. There is no room out here for the one who runs. The eighth, no man shall strike another aboard the ship. All quarrels shall be carried ashore and settled there, with sword or pistol fairly, with the quartermaster standing as judge. No fighting below decks. No knives drawn in the dark of the hold. If 2 men hate each other, and on a ship 60 feet long, men will come to hate each other, they must hold their hate until the ship reaches land, and then settle it on the beach in the open, by the rules, with the whole company looking on. It kept men alive. It kept the small dark space of the ship from becoming a place of murder. The 9th article, listen closely to the 9th, because there is nothing else like it in all the world of that age. No man shall talk of breaking up the company, of going their separate ways, until each has earned £1,000. And here is the wonder of it: if any man should lose a limb in the service of the ship, or become a cripple in their work, he shall have 800 pieces of 8 from the common stock, and for lesser hurts, lesser sums, each according to its kind. Do you understand what that is? That is insurance. That is a fund, held in common, to pay a man who is maimed in the work, to make sure that the man who loses an arm or a leg, or an eye in the taking of a prize, is not simply cast aside to beg and starve, but is paid fairly a known and agreed sum from money set aside for exactly that purpose. The lawful world would not invent such a thing for honest workmen for nearly 200 years. And here it is, written on a pirate's paper, in a ship's cabin on the warm, dark sea in the year 1715. These outlaws, these thieves, these men the whole world wanted dead, they had built, among themselves, a fairer and kinder care for the broken man than any king or any company offered to the honest poor. And the last of them, the captain and the quartermaster, shall each receive 2 shares of every prize, the master, the boatswain, and the gunner 1 share and a half, the other officers 1 and a quarter, and every other man 1 share each. And the musicians, for the ship had musicians, men who played the fiddle and the pipe to lighten the long days and stir the blood before a fight. The musicians shall have rest on the Sabbath day, but on the other 6 days and nights, not without special favor. Even the fiddler, you see, even the fiddler was thought of, and given by the written law of the ship 1 day in 7 to rest his hands. That is the whole of it. That is the constitution of your small wooden country, sworn to by every man aboard, the lowest sailor and the captain alike, equal under it, bound by it, free because of it. Lie still and let it settle over you like a blanket. There is something in those plain, hard rules that is deeply, strangely peaceful, the peace of men who, having been given no justice by the world, sat down together and wrote their own, and swore to keep it, and mostly did. The lights go out at 8. Every man has a vote. No man strikes another in the dark. The broken man is cared for. Carry those into sleep with you when sleep comes. They are a better lullaby than most. Chapter 5. The Quartermaster. A shape moves along the deck, unhurried, and the men it passes go quiet, and then murmur again behind it. You know that walk. You would know it in the deepest dark, by the rhythm of it alone, slow, even certain, a man who does not need to hurry because the ship will wait for him. It is the quartermaster, making his round of the deck in the last of the dusk, and you watch his dark shape move from the helm forward toward the mast, pausing here to murmur a word, there to lay a hand on a younger man's shoulder, checking, always checking, that all is as it should be before the night closes in. He is the second man aboard. In some ways, on most nights, he is the first. You may think the captain rules this ship. He does, and he does not. Here is a thing the lawful world never understood about these outlaws, and it is one of the strangest and finest things about them. The captain rules in one circumstance only, in the fight. When the iron is flying, when a prize is to be chased and taken, when the moment comes that needs one will and one voice and instant obedience, then the captain is absolute, and every man leaps to his word without question, because in that moment hesitation is death. But the moment the fight is over, the captain's great power folds away again like a sail being furled, and the ordinary life of the ship returns to other hands. And the hands it returns to are these, the quartermasters, the man now walking the dark deck, the man the crew themselves elected to stand between them and any captain who might forget that he serves them and not the other way round. It is the quartermaster who divides the plunder, coin by coin and bolt of cloth by bolt of cloth, so fairly that no man can grumble, because the man dividing it is one of their own and answerable to them. It is the quartermaster who settles the quarrels, who stands as judge when 2 men's hatred boils over, who names the time and the place on the beach where they will settle it, and sees that they settle it fairly. It is the quartermaster who keeps the ship's stores and metes out the food and the drink. It is the quartermaster who leads the boarding party when a prize is taken, going first over the rail into the danger. because the men will follow the one who shares their risk, and not the one who hangs back. And it is the quartermaster who speaks for the crew to the captain, who carries to the cabin the will of the men before the mast, and who can, if the captain pushes too hard, call for the vote that throws the captain down. A man wrote a book about these pirates, not so many years after this very night, a man who called himself Captain Charles Johnson, though no one is quite sure who he truly was. And he wrote of the quartermaster a line worth remembering. He said the quartermaster was a kind of humble imitation of the old Roman tribune of the people, the officer the common people of ancient Rome chose to protect them from the great and powerful, the one man whose whole office was to speak for the weak against the strong. That is what the quartermaster was, a tribune of the people, elected by 40 rough sailors on a small ship, to make sure that no man among them, not even the captain, could ride roughshod over the rest. Set that beside the navy these men had fled, where a captain was a small god, and a sailor's life was worth less than a coil of good rope, and you begin to feel the size of what these outlaws had made. The captain, you should understand, was elected too. The men chose him for his skill and his daring and his luck, and the men could choose him. If he proved a coward or a fool or a tyrant or simply unlucky, for luck mattered, and a captain who took no prizes was a captain the men grew tired of, they would gather, and they would talk, and they would vote, and a new captain would be raised up, and the old one set down, sometimes gently, sometimes not. There were captains, famous ones, who were deposed by their own crews and left on some island to find their own way home. The power flowed up from the men and could be taken back by the men. Imagine telling that to a king. Imagine telling the captain of one of His Majesty's ships that his crew might vote him out of his command one warm evening and choose another in his place. It would have seemed to such men like the world turned upside down, like madness, like the end of all good order. And yet here it was, working on the dark sea, night after night, a whole way of governing men that the great civilized world would not arrive at for generations. The quartermaster has reached the mast now. He stands there a moment, a dark, unhurried shape against the last gray light, and he looks up at the single sail and the lines that hold it, reading them the way you read a friend's face, and then he looks out at the sea on either side, north and south, checking the dark horizon for any shape that should not be there. There is none. There is only the warm wind and the long swell and the coming stars. Satisfied, he turns, and his slow, even walk carries him back toward the stern, toward the helm, where a man stands at the long tiller holding the ship steady on her course through the deepening dark. This is the order of your world, then, not the hard vertical order of the lawful ships, where every man is above some men and below others, and the lash runs always downward. Something flatter than that, and stranger, and in its rough way more just. A captain for the fight, a quartermaster for the life. A vote for every man, and over all of it the written articles, sworn and binding, the law these men gave themselves because the world gave them none. It is not gentle, this order. Men still die under it, and die young. But there is a fairness in it that the men can feel, and that fairness is part of what lets them sleep, the knowledge, carried down into the dark of the hold each night, that no man aboard can be cheated or beaten or thrown away at another's whim, that they are governed, even here, even now, by laws of their own making and by men of their own choosing. The quartermaster passes you once more on his way aft. In the dark you cannot see his face, only the steady shape of him and the calm of his unhurried walk. He says nothing. There is nothing that needs saying. All is well. The ship is sound, the watch is set, the course is true, and the night is coming on. And somewhere near the stern, very soon now, a hand is reaching for the rope of the ship's bell. Chapter 6, 8 Log. The bell, 8 strokes this time, struck slow and clear, the bronze notes spreading out across the dark water and fading. You count them without meaning to, your body counts them, the way it has learned to count everything aboard this ship. 8 bells. And 8 bells at this hour means one thing above all others, one thing written into the very articles you swore to: the lights go out. All across the ship, the small flames begin to die. A man cups his hand around a lantern by the mast and leans in and blows, and the light there is gone, and a patch of the deck falls into darkness. Below in the hold, the same thing is happening. The few stub candles that lit the long, low space are pinched out one by one between calloused fingers, or snuffed under a cap, and the warm orange glow that pooled among the beams shrinks and vanishes, and the dark comes flooding in to take its place. The rule is older than this ship, and plain in its reason. Fire is the great terror of a wooden world. A ship is a thing made entirely of the most burnable stuff. There is dry timber, tarred rope, canvas, casks of powder waiting in the dark, floating on water that would put out nothing and save no one. A single careless flame, a single tipped candle in a drunken hour, and the whole ship becomes a torch on the open sea, and there is nowhere to run. And so at 8 o'clock, by the law of the articles, the flames die, and the ship gives herself over to the dark. But the articles, you will remember, left one small door open. Any man who wishes to keep drinking after 8 o'clock may do so on the open deck. Not below, where a dropped cup or a dropped candle is death, but up here in the night air, under the bare sky where no flame is needed and nothing can catch. And so a few of the men do drift up onto the deck now, the ones not yet ready for sleep, carrying their share of the rum, and they settle themselves along the rail or against the base of the mast, dark shapes in the starlight, passing a cup between them, talking low. You can hear them, the murmur of their voices, the soft knock of a wooden cup set down on the deck, a low laugh. There is no harm in them. They are only men unwilling to let the day go, sitting up a little longer under the stars before they too go down into the dark to sleep. For now, stay up here a moment with them before you go below. Feel how the world has changed in these few minutes since the lights went out. With the lamps burning, the ship was a small bright island, and the night was a wall of black pressing in on every side. But now that the flames are gone, your eyes begin to open to the dark slowly, the way eyes do, and you find that the night is not black at all. It is full of light, faint, silver, scattered light, but light. The stars have come out in their thousands while the lamps blinded you to them, and now they wheel overhead in a great glittering arch from horizon to horizon, more stars than any city dweller ever sees, more than you would have believed the sky could hold. And the sea has caught their light and gives it back in a million broken silver flecks, and the sail above you glows a soft pale gray, and the men's faces, when you turn to them, are faintly visible in the starlight, no longer shapes but faces, tired and peaceful, looking up. This is why the eye must lose the flame before it can find the stars. The little light close at hand blinds you to the vast light far away. Put out the candle, and the universe comes in. The men along the rail have noticed it too, the way they always do, the way men at sea have noticed it since the first men went to sea. One of them, the older one, the former king's man, tips his head back and looks up at the great wheel of stars and says something low to the man beside him, naming one of them perhaps, an old name from an old life, and the other man grunts and looks up too. They do not say much. There is not much to say in the face of it. But you can feel, in their stillness, the same thing you feel, that strange settling of the heart that comes over a man under a great sky at night. The feeling of being very small and somehow, because of it, very safe. The troubles of the day shrink down to nothing under that much sky. The fear of the king's ships, the memory of old cruelties, the worry over the next prize and the next meal, all of it grows quiet and far away beneath the slow turning of the stars. The cup goes round once more, and then the men begin to stir, and to rise, one and then another, stretching, knocking the stiffness out of their backs, murmuring their good nights. The day is truly over now. One by one they move toward the open hatch that leads down into the hold, and lower themselves through it into the deeper dark below, where their hammocks wait. You hear their feet on the ladder, the soft sounds of men finding their places in the dark, the creak of canvas taking a body's weight. The deck empties. Soon only the watch remains above, the few men who will keep the ship through the dark hours while the rest of you sleep, and they take up their stations quietly, at the helm, at the bow, and the talking is done. It is your turn now, time to go below, time to leave the great wheeling sky and climb down into the warm, close dark of the hold, where 40 men sleep slung in canvas 18 inches above one another, rocked by the sea. Go to the hatch. Feel for the smooth, worn rail of the ladder, and find the first rung with your foot, and go down, slow, into the dark, into the smell of tar and salt and sleeping men, into the place where you will pass the night. Down out of the wind and the stars, into the breathing dark below. Chapter 7. The Hammock and the Taino. Canvas takes your weight, and the world begins to swing. You have found your place in the dark, your own length of canvas, slung between two beams, the cloth worn soft as an old shirt by the nights you have spent in it. And you have done the thing you have done 1,000 times now, the small ungainly trick of getting into a hammock that every sailor learns and never forgets. A hand on the rope at each end, a careful sit, a swing of the legs, a moment of teetering, and then you are in, settled, lying back, and the hammock closes gently around you like a cupped hand, and it begins to swing. That is the gift of it. That is the whole secret of why a sailor sleeps in a hanging cloth and not on a solid bed. The ship rolls, all night she rolls, long and slow on the warm swell, and a man in a fixed bunk would be flung against the wall and back again, rolled and jostled and woken 100 times before dawn. But the hammock does not roll with the ship. It hangs from its 2 points and it stays level, swinging gently inside the ship's larger motion, so that the world heaves and tilts all around you while you lie still and easy at the center of it, rocked, soothed, held. The ship does the moving, you do the resting. The hammock takes the violence of the sea and turns it into a cradle's sway. And here, in the swinging dark, let me tell you where this gift came from, because it is one of the quiet wonders of the world, and almost no one who sleeps in a hammock has ever known it. It did not come from the great shipyards of Europe. It did not come from the navies or the merchant companies or the clever minds of the old world at all. It came from here, from these very islands. From the people who lived on these warm green shores long, long before any European sail ever broke the horizon, the people the Spanish called the Taino, a branch of the great Arawak peoples who had spread across these islands over thousands of years. They were here when the world was young, and for centuries before any ship of yours or mine was ever built, in their villages among the palms, they had slept in beds of woven cotton, hung between two trees or two posts, swinging in the warm night air. They had good reason for it, those first sleepers. The ground in these islands is no friend to a sleeping body. It is hot and damp, and it crawls with insects, with biting ants and spiders and creeping things, and the rains come and the water runs, and to lie on the bare earth is to lie among all of that. So the Taino lifted their beds into the air. They wove them from the cotton that grew wild and abundant in their islands, a net or a cloth strong enough to hold a sleeping body, and they hung it between two trees, and there they slept up off the wet, up off the crawling ground, up where the night breeze could move beneath them and cool them, swinging softly in the dark. A wiser bed for a warm country was never made. They had been sleeping so in comfort for 1,000 years and more, while the people of the cold north still lay on straw and bare boards. And then the ships came. The great event, the turning of the world, the year 1492, when the sails of Columbus rose over the edge of the sea, and the two halves of the world met at last here in these islands. Much of what came after was terrible beyond telling, and the Taino people themselves, who had slept so wisely and lived so long upon these shores, were within a few generations all but destroyed by the diseases and the cruelties the ships brought with them. That is a grief that belongs to the daylight and to other tellings. But among the things the ships carried back across the ocean, among all the gold and the strange plants and the terrible new appetites, was this small, kind, peaceful thing, the woven hanging bed. The sailors saw the Taino sleeping in their swinging cotton, and they understood at once what it was good for, and they took the idea home. It spread through the ships of the world like a slow tide. Within 100 years, the Navy of England had taken up the hammock fleet-wide. By the 1590s, every king's ship was rigging canvas hammocks for her crew, and would go on doing so for 300 years and more, right up until the great wars of our own near times. Because there was nothing better. A hammock could be slung in a minute and stowed in a minute, rolled up and lashed away each morning so the space it hung in could be used for other things, and unrolled and hung again each night. It needed no frame, no floor, no fixed place. It cost almost nothing. It held a sleeping man level through the worst of the seas heaving. It was, for a ship, simply perfect. And it had come, this perfect thing, from the islands you now sail among, from a people who had worked it out 1,000 years before anyone thought to write it down. So when you lie here tonight, swinging in your canvas in the dark, rocked easy while the ship heaves around you, remember that you are held in a thing far older than any pirate, far older than any king's navy, far older than the very idea of the ships that carry it. You are sleeping the way the first people of these islands slept, on their warm shores, under their palms, 1,000 years and more ago. A small gift, handed quietly across the great gulf of the meeting of worlds, from those sleepers under the palms to every sailor who ever crossed an ocean since. From them to you here now in the dark. Feel the swing of it. Feel how it answers the ship, how it stays soft and level while the great hull tilts and rights itself, all through the night. Around you in the dark, the other hammocks hang in their long row, each with its sleeping man, 18 inches between one and the next, so that the whole hold is a hanging garden of sleeping sailors swinging gently and all together in the same slow rhythm, breathing, rocked, at rest. Let your own breath slow to join them. There is nowhere you need to be and nothing you need to do. The hammock has you. The sea has the ship. And the old soft wisdom of a vanished people has you both here in the dark and will hold you safe until the morning. Chapter 8. The Night Watch. Above you on the deck, a man is awake under the stars, and he is glad to be. You can hear his footstep now and then through the deck boards over your head, slow, unhurried, the pace of a man who has hours yet to fill and is in no hurry to fill them. He is on watch. While you and half the crew lie swinging in the dark below, the other half keeps the ship, and this is one of them, pacing the dark deck under the great wheel of stars, keeping the sea while you sleep. Come up out of the hold with me for a while in your mind and stand beside him in the night, because the night watch is the most beautiful thing in all the sailor's hard life, and you should see it before you sleep. The crew is divided in two, you understand. Half on watch, half asleep, always, turn and turn about through the whole of the day and night. 4 hours on, 4 hours off, and at the supper hour the watch is split again into 2 short watches of 2 hours each. The dog watches, a small clever trick, so that the same men do not stand the same cold middle of the night watch every single night, but the burden shifts and shares around the whole crew fairly, the way everything aboard this ship is meant to be shared fairly. One watch is led by the quartermaster, the other by the sailing master, and between them they keep the ship turning through the dark like a wheel that never stops. It is a small enough company that keeps the deck now. A man at the tiller holding the ship on her course. A man forward at the bow, watching the dark water ahead for anything the ship might strike. And high above, far up the single mast, near the very top of it on a small platform called the top, a lookout, perched up there in the rigging with the whole night spread out beneath him, watching the rim of the world for a sail. It is the best place on the ship, that high platform, and a kind of honor to be sent there. On some ships, the first man to sight a prize from the masthead was promised an extra share of whatever the prize yielded, and so men kept a sharp watch indeed. But there is nothing to sight tonight. Tonight there is only the dark sea and the dark sky and the long warm wind, and the man at the masthead has the whole of it to himself. Stand at the rail and feel the wind. It comes steady out of the northeast, the way it almost always comes in these waters, warm and constant and sure, the great trade wind that blows across this whole sea, day and night, season upon season, the wind that carries the ships of all the world from the old lands to the new. It does not gust and die the way the fickle winds of the north do. It simply blows, hour after hour, 15 knots, 20 knots, a vast patient river of air pouring always from the same quarter, and the sailors trust it the way they trust the rising of the sun, and they set their course by it and lean on it, and let it carry them through the dark. The sail above you is full and steady and silent. The ship makes her quiet way. The wind has been blowing just so for longer than any man has been alive, and will blow so long after every man aboard is dust, and there is a great calm in that, in leaning on something so much older and steadier than yourself. Now look up at the sky, and let it take you, because there is no sky in all the world like the Caribbean sky at night seen from the deck of a ship far from any land. There is not a single lamp anywhere, only the faint glow of the binnacle light over the compass at the helm, shielded so it does not blind the helmsman's eyes, a small soft amber gleam, and otherwise nothing, no light made by the hand of man for 100 miles in any direction. And so the stars come down in their full glory, undimmed, uncountable, a powder of light flung across the whole black dome of heaven from edge to edge, so thick in places that they run together into a pale glowing river, the great road of stars the ancients called the Milky Way, arching clear across the sky. You can see by it. You can truly see by starlight alone. Once your eyes have let the dark in, see the pale sail, the dark line of the rail, the gleam of the wake trailing silver behind the ship. And the men who sail here read those stars the way you might read a page. Low on the northern horizon, that steady star there, the one that does not move while all the others wheel slowly about it through the night, that is the seaman's oldest friend, the pole star, the North Star, hanging low over these warm latitudes, marking the way home to the cold lands for any man who still calls them home. And far to the south, low over the other rim of the world, a small bright cross of stars the northern sailors had never seen until they came to these seas, and which they learned to steer by here, the Southern Cross, pointing the way to the bottom of the world. Between those two, the whole wheel of the night turns, slow and silent and sure, and a man who knows the stars is never wholly lost upon the sea, however far from land he sails. And then there is the sea itself, which has its own strange light tonight. Look down over the side at the water the ship is cutting through, and you will see it, a soft cold glow in the disturbed water, a ghostly greenish silver fire breaking along the hull and trailing away astern in the wake, sparking and swirling where the ship's passage stirs the dark sea. It is in the water itself, this light, a living light, and on some nights it is so bright that the whole wake of the ship is a glowing river, and every fish that darts away leaves a streak of cold fire behind it. The sailors have their own old names and tales for it. It is one of the small wonders of these waters, this fire in the sea, and a man on the night watch may lean on the rail for an hour, watching the glowing water slide past and curl away into the dark, and feel that he is sailing not on water at all, but through some quiet field of cold and silent stars. This is the night watch. The wind on your face, the wheel of stars overhead, the fire in the sea below, the silent ship making her way through the warm dark, and the long hours to fill with nothing but watching and feeling and being awake in the deep middle of the night while the world sleeps. It is hard, in its way, the tiredness, the cold of the small hours even here, the heaviness of the eyes near the end of a watch. But there is a peace in it that the men who have known it never quite forget. To be awake and alone with the sea and the sky, trusted with the lives of the sleeping men below, holding the small ship steady through the dark toward the morning. There are worse ways to spend the deep hours of a life. Now come down again, gently, back to your hammock and your place in the swinging dark, and let the watch keep the ship and sleep, and let the man at the masthead watch the stars for both of you. Chapter 9. Nassau, the Pirate Towns. Close your eyes in the dark, and you can almost smell it, wood smoke and rum and roasting meat, drifting out across the water from a shore you cannot see. Nassau. The men aboard say the name the way other men say the name of home, half longing and half laughing, and tonight lying in your hammock as the ship carries you on through the dark. You find yourself thinking of it too, the low sandy island somewhere over the northern horizon, and the ramshackle town upon it that is the nearest thing in all the world to a place where men like you are welcome. You were there not long ago. You will likely be there again. And on a night like this, with the ship far out on the dark sea, Nassau rises in the memory like a warm and crowded dream. It is not much to look at, the truth of it. A curve of pale beach, a scatter of low buildings, wooden houses, palm-thatched huts, a few stone walls left from an old fort the world long ago stopped caring about. Behind the beach, the green tangle of the island. And in the shallow turquoise water of the harbor, the ships, pirate ships of every kind, sloops and brigantines, and the odd captured merchantmen riding at anchor, and others hauled up on the sand and lying on their sides for cleaning, their bottoms exposed to the sun and the men crawling over them. There is no proper dock, no grand stone quay. There is only the beach, and the warm shallow water, and the ships, and the town that has grown up behind them to serve the men who sail them. But for a few short years, and you are living in those very years now, though you cannot know it from the inside, this poor sandy town is something the world has rarely seen and will rarely see again. It is a place with no master. No governor sits here. No king's law runs here. No tax collector, no magistrate, no garrison of soldiers, no lord of any kind. The old colonial order that rules every other patch of ground in these seas simply does not reach this far, not yet. And into that gap the pirates have come and made the island their own. 1,000 of them at the height of it. 1,000 outlaws, give or take, using Nassau as their harbor and their market and their resting place, governed by nothing but their own customs and their own strength and the rough democracy they carry with them from their ships. There is a man whose name you hear often when Nassau is spoken of, Benjamin, an old hand, a leader among the pirates of the place, captain of a loose brotherhood of them that they call the Flying Gang. He is one of the closest things Nassau has to a chief, and even he is no governor, no lord. He is only a man the others respect, a man whose word carries weight because of what he has done and who he is, not because of any office or any crown. Power in Nassau is like that. It is not given from above. There is no above. It is taken and held and lost among equals, the same as it is aboard the ships, by skill, by daring, by the willingness of other men to follow. And so the town lives its strange free life. By day the heat lies heavy on the beach and the men careen their ships and mend their sails and sleep off the night before in whatever shade they can find. But in the evening, when the sun goes down and the worst of the heat lifts off the sand, Nassau wakes. Fires are lit along the beach. The taverns, such as they are, rough open shelters of wood and palm thatch with a few barrels and a few benches, fill with men. The rum comes out. Someone has a fiddle, and someone else a drum, and the music starts, and the talking and the boasting and the laughing rise up into the warm dark, and the smell of roasting meat drifts over the water, and the firelight throws the dancing shapes of men against the palms. There is gambling despite the articles, for the articles only bind a man aboard his ship, and ashore he is his own fool. There is drink, far more of it than any ship's discipline would allow. There is every kind of trade, honest and otherwise, in everything men carry off the sea. It is wild, and it is rough, and it is, in its way, freer than any town those men had ever known. A man could walk the beach at Nassau and owe nothing to any lord, bow to no master, fear no press gang, answer to no law but the rough fellowship of his kind. For men who had spent their lives being owned and ordered and beaten, that freedom was a kind of wine stronger than any rum, and they drank it deep while it lasted. Lying here in your hammock, you can feel the pull of it even now, the warm, crowded human noise of it, the fires and the music and the company, so different from the great empty silence of the dark sea you sailed tonight. But even now, even at the very height of it, the freedom of Nassau is borrowed time, and some of the older and wiser men know it. The lawful world does not forget a wound like this for long. Far away, in the cold halls of London, men in wigs are even now speaking the name of Nassau with anger, and laying their plans, and choosing the man they will send to put an end to it. A new governor is coming, a king's pardon in one hand and a hangman's rope in the other. But that is a worry for another night, a shadow over the northern horizon that has not yet fallen. Tonight Nassau still burns its fires on the beach, and still pours its rum, and still belongs to no one but the wild free men who made it theirs. Hold it in your mind that way as you drift towards sleep, the warm lights on the dark shore, the music over the water, the one free town at the edge of the world, still standing, still wild, still theirs, for a little while longer. Chapter 10. Rum. A wooden cup is pressed into your hand in the dark, and you feel the warmth of it before you taste it. This is the ration. Even now, even at the easing of the day, there is a cup that goes round, and a measure for every man, doled out fair, and equal by the quartermaster the way all things are doled out fair, and equal aboard this ship. You wrap your fingers around the worn wood of the cup, and you raise it, and the smell reaches you first, sweet and sharp and dark, the smell of burnt sugar and fire and the islands, and then you drink, and the rum goes down warm, spreading its slow heat through your chest, and you let out a long breath, and something in you loosens that has been tight all day. Rum. It is the great drink of these warm seas, and there is a reason for it that has nothing to do with pleasure and everything to do with survival, and the reason is this: the water goes bad. Out here, far from any spring, a ship must carry her water in casks, great wooden barrels stowed down in the dark of the hold, and water kept so, in wood, in heat, for weeks on end, does not stay sweet. It grows foul. It greens and slimes and breeds, and after a few weeks at sea, the water in the casks is a thing a man drinks only because he must, holding his breath against the stink of it. But rum does not spoil. Strong spirit keeps forever, sweet as the day it was made, and so the ships carry rum, and the men drink it, mixed with the doubtful water to make the water bearable, and a little of the rum's strength makes the foul water safe to swallow. It is medicine as much as it is pleasure. It is one of the things that keeps a crew alive on a long passage, and it is cheap, here cheaper than anywhere on earth, because here is where it is made. All across these islands the great fields of sugar cane grow, and the sugar is boiled and crushed and refined, and what is left over when the white sugar is taken, a thick, dark, bitter syrup called molasses, was once thrown away as waste, until someone discovered that it could be fermented and distilled into a strong, dark, fiery spirit. Rum. The drink of the leavings, made from the very dregs of the sugar trade, and so cheap and so plentiful in these islands that it became the common drink of every sailor and every poor man and every pirate in the whole Caribbean Sea. The men aboard this ship have drunk rum all their sailing lives. It is as much a part of the sea to them as the salt and the wind. But do not imagine them drunk. That is one of the lies told about these men, and the truth is stranger and more sober than the tale. A pirate ship could not be a drunken ship. Think of what these men do. They sail a fast and tricky vessel through reef-strewn waters. They fight when they must. They flee the king's ships. They live every day by their wits and their skill and their readiness, and a crew sodden with drink would be a dead crew within a week, wrecked on a reef or run down by a frigate or sunk by their own carelessness. They knew this. It is why the articles you swore put the lights out at 8 o'clock, why the heavy drinking was pushed up onto the open deck and out of the dangerous dark below, why the careful captains kept a hand on the stores. There were wild nights ashore at Nassau, yes, when the work was done and the danger far off, and men drank themselves blind on the beach. But at sea, on watch, on the move, the rum was rationed and measured and respected, because the men's lives hung on their staying sharp. Sober competence was the price of staying alive out here, and the men paid it mostly because the alternative was the reef or the rope. There is a finer way to drink it too, and on a good night the men make it. They take the rum and mix it with water and add to it sugar and a little squeeze of the sharp green citrus fruit that grows in these islands, and grate over it a dusting of nutmeg or other spice, and they call the drink that comes of it bumbo. It is a kinder thing than raw rum, sweet and tart and warming, the sourness of the citrus cutting the heaviness of the spirit, the spice rising in the nose. An old buccaneer of the last century, a sharp-eyed wandering man named who sailed these seas and wrote down what he saw, noted long ago how the men of the sea mixed their rum so, with water and with the juice of limes, and there is a wisdom in it deeper than they knew, for the sour citrus that made the drink taste better was the very thing, though no one understood it yet, that kept the dread sickness of the long voyage from creeping into their bones. But that is a tale for the next chapter and the food they eat. For now there is only the cup in your hand and the warmth of it and the slow loosening of the day. The cup has gone round and come back empty. The men settle. The rum has done its small kind work, taken the edge off the aching backs, and the sunburnt skin warmed the chest, softened the hard corners of the day, eased the body down toward sleep. There is no riot in it, no wildness, only this: 40 tired men, each with his measure, each a little warmer and a little easier than he was, settling into the dark of a ship far out on a dark sea. The cup is set down, the talking fades, and the warmth of the rum spreads slow through you as you lie in your swinging canvas, loosening you, lowering you, carrying you down by gentle degrees toward the deep place where sleep is waiting. Chapter 11. What They Eat. Somewhere forward, even now, there is the smell of food, and it is not a fine smell, but it is a welcome one. It comes to you faintly through the dark of the hold, the smell of salt meat, and of wood smoke from the small, careful fire where the cooking is done, and of something stewed and brown and savory. The men have eaten already, before the lights went out. The main meal of the day is taken in the afternoon, while there is still light to see by and no need of dangerous flame. But the smell of it lingers, the way the smell of food always lingers in a closed wooden place, and it sets you thinking, here in the dark, of what it is that keeps these men alive on the long, empty reaches of the sea. It is plain fare and hard. Begin with the bread, though it is barely bread at all. They call it hardtack, or ship's biscuit, and it is the foundation of every sailor's diet in this age of the world. Flour and water and a little salt, mixed to a stiff paste and baked, and baked, and baked again, until every drop of moisture is driven out of it, and what remains is a flat, hard disk so dry and so dense that it will keep for months, for years even without rotting. It is hard as a roof slate when it is fresh from the oven, hard enough, the old sailors say, to knock a man down with, hard enough to ring like stone when you rap it on the table. A man does not so much bite it as soak it, in water or in the stew, until it softens enough to be chewed, or else he sucks at it patiently until it yields. It is dull, and it is hard, and it is the bread of the sea, and every man aboard has eaten 10,000 of them and will eat 10,000 more. But there is a thing about the biscuit that you have learned, as every sailor learns it, and it is this. After some weeks at sea, the biscuit is no longer empty of life. The weevils find it. Small pale grubs, the larvae of a little beetle, that bore their way into the dry hard disks and live there, hidden, multiplying in the dark of the bread store, until nearly every biscuit has its quiet inhabitants. And the men, when they go to eat, have a habit so old and so universal that no one thinks twice about it. They rap the biscuit smartly on the table 2 or 3 times, hard, and the knocking drives the weevils out, and they crawl away, and the man eats what is left. Some do it in the dark on purpose so as not to see. Some, hungry enough and hardened enough, do not bother to knock at all, and reckon the weevils a little extra meat and no harm done. It is the bread of the sea. You eat it, weevils and all, and you are glad of it, and you think nothing of it, because there is nothing else. And there is meat, salt meat, pork and beef, packed down in great casks of brine, salted so heavily that it too will keep for months in the heat of the hold. It comes out of the cask grey and hard, and so salt that it must be soaked in water before it can be cooked and eaten, to draw some of the brine back out of it. And even then it is a tough and salty thing, more like leather than like the fresh meat a man remembers from the land. With it there are dried peas, that swell and soften when they are boiled, and make a thick yellow pottage that fills the belly. And out of all of these together, the cook makes the great dish of the sailor's table, the dish they call salmagundi, a grand name for a humble thing. It is a hash, a stew, a mixing together of whatever there is. The salt meat chopped small, the soaked biscuit, the boiled peas, and whatever else the ship may have, a pickled vegetables from a captured store, a little oil, a little vinegar, hard-boiled eggs if there are any, a few spices saved for the purpose, all stirred up together warm in a pot and shared out among the men. It is rough and it is hearty, and on a good day, with a captured prize lately taken and fresh meat or fresh fruit among the takings, it can be very good indeed. The first thing the men sees when they take a ship is almost never the gold. It is the food. Fresh meat, fresh bread, fresh fruit, the things they have not tasted in weeks, these are the truest treasure of the sea to a hungry crew. For there is a sickness that haunts the long voyages, a slow and terrible thing that comes from the want of fresh food, and the men have all seen it, and they fear it the way they fear the reef and the king's ships. It begins with weariness and aching limbs, and then the gums grow soft and bleed, and the teeth loosen, and old wounds long healed open again, as if the body has forgotten how to hold itself together, and a man grows weak and wretched, and at last may die of it. And no one in this age knows quite why, or what the cure is, though they are beginning slowly to guess. They have noticed, some of them, that the men who eat fresh fruit do not fall sick, that the sour green citrus of the islands seems to hold the sickness off. The wandering buccaneer noted it. Others noted it. They did not understand it, that the body needs something the fresh food carries and the salt meat and dry biscuit lack. But they had seen enough to half believe it, and to value the limes and the oranges of these islands as something more than a pleasure. And here in this, the pirates of these warm waters are luckier than the sailors who cross the great wide oceans. For the Caribbean is full of islands, and the islands are full of fruit, and a ship is never more than a few days from a green shore where oranges and limes and other fresh things may be had. The men who creep across the vast empty Atlantic or round the bottom of the world may go months without sight of land, and the sickness eats them by the score. But here, among the close scattered islands, a crew can keep itself fresh and whole far more easily, and the dread sickness, though it is never wholly forgotten, comes less often and bites less deep. It is one more small mercy of these warm green seas that a hungry man is rarely far from a tree heavy with fruit, and a sick man rarely far from the thing that might cure him, even if no one yet knows quite why it does. The smell of the afternoon's cooking has faded now to almost nothing. The men have eaten and drunk their rum, and the day's hunger is answered, and the body, fed and warmed, grows heavy and content in the way that only a fed and warmed body can. There is a deep animal peace in it, the peace of the belly filled at the end of a hard day, the oldest comfort there is. Lie in it, let it carry you down. The food was plain and the bread was hard and there were weevils in it, and none of that matters now. What matters is that you are fed and warm and rocked in the dark, and that is enough, that has always been enough, to let a tired body let go and slide down at last towards sleep. Chapter 12. The Deep of the Hold. The sounds change when you go down into the very bottom of her. You have come down now into the deepest part of the ship, below even the hold where the hammocks hang, down where the curved walls of her sides draw in toward the keel, down where the ballast lies and the casks are stowed, down to the lowest place there is, where the ship meets her own deepest dark. And here the sounds are different. The hiss of the water is closer now, just the other side of the timber from your ear, a constant rushing whisper of the sea sliding past only inches away. The creak of the hull is louder, deeper, great slow groans as the whole frame of the ship works and flexes in the swell, timber grinding against timber, the sound of a living thing breathing under strain. And there is another sound, low and rhythmic, that never quite stops, a soft, liquid slosh and gurgle deep in the belly of her, the sound of the bilge. Every wooden ship leaks. That is the first truth of her, the one the landsman never guesses. However well she is built, however tightly her seams are caulked with oakum and tar, the sea finds its way in, a little here, a little there, weeping through the joints of the planking, trickling down from the deck above in every rain and every wave that breaks over her, and all of it runs down, by the law of all falling water, to the very lowest place inside her, the bilge, the dark cavity above the keel where the ship's own leaked-in sea collects. And there it sits, and there it sloshes back and forth with every roll of the ship, a black and stagnant pool in the bottom of the dark. It cannot be allowed to rise too high, or the ship grows heavy and slow and at last unsafe, and so it must be pumped, and so at intervals day and night, the men work the bilge pump, and you hear it, the clank and suck and gush of it, drawing the dark water up from the depths and spilling it back into the sea where it belongs. It does not smell sweet, the bilge. Let me be honest with you about the world you are sleeping in, for it was not a clean world, and there is no use pretending it was. The water that collects in the bilge is not just seawater. It is seawater mixed with all the runoff of a crowded ship, the spillage and the waste, and the rot of 40 men living packed together on 60 feet of wood. And it sits there in the warm, dark, stagnant, breeding, and it gives off a smell. A thick, sour, organic reek, the smell of rot and salt and old wood and worse, that rises up from the depths of the ship and hangs in the close air of the hold. The sailors of this age knew that smell so well they barely smelled it anymore. It was simply the smell of a ship, the smell of the sea life, as much a part of their world as the salt and the tar. A landsman brought below would gag at it. The sailor, long since used to it, breathes it without a thought and sleeps soundly in the midst of it, the way a man sleeps soundly by a river he has lived beside all his life and no longer hears. And there are other living things down here in the dark with you, and you have made your peace with them too. There are rats, there are always rats, on every ship that ever sailed, come aboard in the cargo or up the mooring ropes in some forgotten port, breeding in the dark of the hold, living on the spilled grain and the gnawed biscuit and whatever else they can find. You hear them sometimes in the night, a small scrabble and patter somewhere among the casks, and you do not even open your eyes. There are roaches that come out when the dark is deepest. There are all the small creeping companions of the wooden ship, the unbidden crew that sails wherever men and food and darkness sail together. The men wage a low, endless war against them and never win it and have stopped expecting to. They are simply there, part of the ship, and a sailor who could not sleep for the rats would never sleep at sea at all. And it is hot. That too you should know. The Caribbean night is warm above, on the open deck, where the trade wind moves, but down here, below the waterline, in the close-packed dark with no wind reaching and 40 warm bodies breathing, it is hotter still, a heavy, damp, tropical warmth that wraps around you like a wet wool blanket. The men sleep in little, and in what they wear, a loose linen shirt, a pair of canvas or duck trousers, nothing more. There is no special garment for sleeping, no nightshirt or nightcap such as a gentleman ashore might own. A sailor sleeps in the clothes he worked in, salt-stiffened and worn soft, and rises in them, and works in them again, and thinks nothing of it. In the heat of the hold, even those few clothes are more than the body wants, and the men lie in their swinging canvas slick with the warm damp of the night, and sleep anyway, because the body learns to sleep through anything that does not threaten it, and the heat does not threaten, it only wraps and weighs and presses down. I tell you all this not to trouble your rest, but for the opposite reason, because there is a strange, deep comfort in it, once you stop fighting it, the comfort of the animal den, the warm, crowded, breathing dark. Strip away the words, the rot and the rats and the reek, and what is left is this. You are in a warm, dark, close place, surrounded by the breathing of your own kind, rocked by a great slow rhythm, held safe in a small, strong shell, while the vast, dark sea slides by just the other side of the wood. It is the oldest safety there is. It is the safety of the cave, of the burrow, of the nest, of the place down in the dark, where the cold and the wide world cannot reach you. The smell that would sicken a stranger is, To you, only the smell of home and safety and your own people near. The sounds that would frighten a child, the groan of the timbers, the slosh of the bilge, the patter in the dark, are to you only the familiar voice of the ship herself, telling you, in her own deep language, that all is as it should be, that she holds, that she carries on, that you may let go and sleep. So let the deep of the hold you. Let the warm, thick dark wrap close around you. Let the great slow creak of the working timbers and the soft endless slosh of the bilge and the far patter of the rats become what they truly are to a sailor, not horrors, but a lullaby, the rough deep lullaby of the living ship, sung low and constant all through the night to the 40 tired men asleep in her belly, and to you among them, deep in the warm dark, far down at the safe still center of the rolling world. Chapter 13. The Man with the Smoking Beard. A name moves through the dark of the hold, half whisper and half legend, and you feel the men around you go quiet to hear it. Someone has spoken of Blackbeard. It happens on the long night watches in the dark before sleep. The men tell over the names of the great ones, the famous ones, the captains whose deeds run ahead of them across all these seas, and no name is greater or runs farther than his. You have never seen him. Most of the men aboard have never seen him. But they all know the name, and they all know the look of him as the tales have built it. And just to speak it in the dark is to summon something, a shape of terror and wonder, half man and half story, the most frightening pirate who ever sailed these warm green waters. His true name, the men say, was Edward Teach, or Thatch. Even that is not quite certain, for a man like him sheds his old name the way a snake sheds skin. He was an Englishman, born, it is thought, in the great western port of Bristol, around 40 years ago now, and he went to sea young as so many do. In the late Great War, he sailed as a privateer, lawfully, taking enemy ships under his country's flag, and learned his trade in that hard school. And when the war ended and the lawful work dried up, he came, like so many, to Nassau and fell in with the old captain of the flying gang, and learned from him and rose, and at last struck out on his own. And then he became the thing the world remembers. He took a great ship, a French vessel, a slaver, captured on the open sea, and he made her his own, and mounted her with guns until she carried 40 of them, a floating fortress, and crewed her with hundreds of men, and gave her a name that has come ringing down the years, Queen Anne's Revenge. With that ship under him, he was a power on the sea that few could stand against, and his name spread, and the merchant captains learned to dread the sight of his flag on the horizon, and to strike their colors at once rather than face him. But here is the strange truth of Blackbeard, the thing that makes him worth thinking of on a quiet night, and it is not what you might expect. His great weapon was not the cannon, nor the cutlass. His great weapon was fear itself, fear deliberately made, fear crafted and staged and worn like armor. He understood, this clever and terrible man, a thing that few fighters ever understand, that a battle won without fighting is the best battle of all, and that a reputation for terror, carefully built, will make men surrender before a single shot is fired, and so save the lives of his own crew and spare him the risk of a real fight. And so he built his terror with care, the way another man might build a ship. It was his appearance above all. He was a big man and dark, and he wore his beard long and black and wild. a great black beard that grew up nearly to his eyes and that he let spread across his whole chest, and he plaited it into tails and tied them with ribbons and made of his own face a thing of dread. And in battle, so the tale goes, written down by that same Captain Johnson who wrote of all these men, and we cannot be wholly sure how much is true and how much is the storyteller's art. In battle, he would take lengths of slow-burning cord, the kind used to fire the cannon, and tuck them up under the brim of his hat and into his hair and his very beard, and light them so that his whole head was wreathed in slow drifting smoke, and his face peered out of it lit by the smouldering glow, like some devil risen up out of the smoke of the pit. Imagine it from the deck of a merchant ship, this great dark smoking demon-faced figure looming at the rail, his beard alight, his eyes burning out of the smoke, and behind him his shouting crew. Few men would choose to fight that. Most struck their colors at once and handed over their cargo and were let go alive, and that was exactly as Blackbeard intended. The fewer who fought, the fewer who died on both sides, and the richer and safer he grew. For the wildest tales of his cruelty, the men in the dark will tell you, are mostly just that tales grown in the telling, the way a story grows each time it is passed from mouth to mouth in the firelight. The truth is that he killed far fewer men than his legend claims, and took most of his many prizes without spilling any blood at all, by the sheer overwhelming dread of his name and his smoking face. He was no gentle man, none of them were, and the world he lived in was a hard and bloody one, but he was, above all, a player of a deep game, a man who understood that the appearance of a monster will do the work of a monster far more cheaply, and who made himself into that appearance with a cold and calculating skill. His end was coming, even in these years, though no man in this dark hold could foresee it. The lawful world would not suffer such a man to live and thrive forever. There would come a day, off a low sandy inlet on the far coast of the mainland, when a king's officer in a small ship would hunt him down at last, and there would be a hard and bloody fight, hand to hand on a heaving deck, and Blackbeard would fall, fighting to the end, and his great fearsome head would be carried away as a trophy on the bowsprit of his enemy's ship. But that is far off, and it is not for tonight. Tonight he is still out there somewhere on these same dark seas, the smoke not yet risen, the legend still building, the most feared man on all the water, and the men in the hold speak his name low, in something between dread and pride, and then fall silent, and listen to the creak of the ship and the slosh of the sea, and think their own thoughts in the dark. Let the name fade now, back into the dark it came from. He is only a story tonight, a shape of smoke and beard and old fear, and stories cannot reach you here in your swinging canvas. Let the great dark smoking figure drift off across the water and grow small and vanish. There is no terror in this hold tonight, only tired men and the warm dark and the rocking sea. Let Blackbeard sail on into his legend, and you stay here, safe and small and sleepy, rocked in the belly of your own quiet ship, far from all the smoke and all the fear, sliding gently down towards sleep. Chapter 14. The Pirate Who Drank Tea. Here is a gentler name to follow the last one into the dark, though he was the most successful of them all. If Blackbeard was the most feared of the pirates of these years, there was another who was the most successful by any measure a man could name, and he was almost his opposite in every way, and the men in the hold speak of him with a different kind of wonder, not dread. but something closer to admiration, even affection. His name was Roberts, though the men call him Black Bart, and the strange truth of him is that he never meant to be a pirate at all, and came to it sideways against his own will, and then proved better at it than any man who ever chose it freely. He was a Welshman, from the far green western edge of Britain, a serious and capable sailing man, and he was an honest mate aboard a slave ship when his life turned over in a single afternoon. His ship was taken by pirates, taken by a Welsh pirate captain, as it happened, a countryman of his, and Roberts, being a skilled navigator, was forced to join the pirate crew against his will, the way skilled men often were, for a crew always needed men who could read the stars and find the way across the trackless sea. He did not want it. He went unwillingly. And then, only a few weeks into his new and unwanted life, the pirate captain was killed in a fight ashore, and the crew, needing a new leader, looked about them and saw at once that this reluctant Welshman was the ablest man among them, and they elected him captain, this man who had been a pirate for barely 6 weeks and had never wanted to be one at all. And he accepted. If he must be a pirate, he is said to have reasoned, better to be a commander and give the orders than a common man and take them. And so the most successful pirate in all the history of these seas began his career by being forced into it, and then voted into command of it. And what a career it was! In 3 short years, sailing these seas and the wide ocean beyond and the far coast of Africa, Roberts took ships beyond counting, 400 of them. The reckoning says 400 prizes in 3 years, more than any other pirate of the age, more perhaps than any other pirate who ever lived. He was bold past all reason, and quick and lucky and a fine commander of men, and his name grew until the merchants of 3 continents trembled at it. It was he whose articles you heard read aloud earlier in the night, those careful, just democratic rules, the most complete that have come down to us, for he was a man who believed in order, even an outlaw's order, and ran his ships with a tight and disciplined hand. But it is the manner of the man that the sailors love to tell of, for he was unlike all the rest. Where the other pirates were rough and wild and filthy, Roberts went about like a lord. In battle, the tales say, he dressed himself in his finest, a rich crimson waistcoat and breeches, a hat with a great red feather curling from it, a gold chain about his neck with a diamond cross hanging from it that he had taken from some Portuguese grandee, his sword in his hand, and his pistols slung on a silk sash over his shoulder. He went into the smoke, and the iron dressed like a man going to a ball, splendid and proud and utterly without fear, and the men loved him for it. And strangest of all, in a world that swam in rum, in a trade whose very lifeblood was strong drink, Roberts did not drink it. He drank tea. He was, by all accounts, a sober man and a hard one on drunkenness in others, and while his crews caroused, he would sit apart with his dish of tea, watchful and clear-eyed, the most successful pirate in the world, taking his quiet refreshment like a country gentleman in his parlor. There is something in that picture that stays with a man, the splendid figure in crimson and gold, plumed and jeweled, standing on the bloody deck of a taken ship, with the smoke still drifting, and the 400th prize riding helpless alongside, and in his hand not a cup of rum, but a dish of tea, cooling in the warm sea air. It is so unexpected, so human, so strange, that it cuts through all the legend and lets you see for a moment a real and particular man, careful and proud and clever and contained, a man who never wanted this life and mastered it utterly all the same, and who held himself a little apart from it even at its wild height, sipping his tea while the world he had stolen swirled around him. His end too was coming, as it came for all of them, and it would come in a great battle far away on the African coast, against a king's ship that hunted him down at last, where he would be killed by a blast of grape shot at the height of the fight, dressed in all his crimson finery, and his men would weep, and throw his body into the sea as he had asked them to, so that no enemy might take it. And after him, the law would take a terrible revenge. Scores of his men hanged together in a single day, the greatest such hanging of all the age, a long row of the dead swinging in the African heat, as a warning to all the world that the time of the pirates was ending. But that, like all the endings, is for later, for the cold gray edge of the tale. Tonight he is alive and splendid and victorious, the lord of the warm seas, somewhere out there under the same stars, drinking his tea on a stolen deck, and the men in the dark tell of him and smile in the dark. And you smile too, sleepy now, at the thought of the most dangerous man on the ocean taking his tea like a gentleman while the smoke clears. And you let the splendid crimson figure fade gently away into the dark with all the rest. Chapter 15. The Two Who Stood to Fight. Now the men in the dark fall to telling of two more, and these two are not like any of the others, for these two were women. You can hear the change in their voices when they come to this tale, a kind of wondering respect, for it ran against everything they knew and everything the articles you swore declared. No women aboard. The rules said plainly, no women under penalty of death, and yet here were two who sailed these very seas anyway, and fought when their crew of grown men would not, and burned their names into the legend of the age so deep that we know them still, 300 years on, when 10,000 fiercer pirates are forgotten. Anne Barney and Mary Read, the two who stood to fight when the men lay drunk. Anne Barney was an Irish woman, fierce and red-haired by the tales, who came young to these islands, to Nassau itself, with a husband she soon tired of. And in the wild free town on the beach she met a pirate captain, a flashy, charming, lesser sort of pirate named John, called Calico Jack for the bright printed cotton cloth he loved to dress himself in, and she left her husband for him, and went to sea at his side, dressed and armed and fighting as fierce as any man in the crew. That was no small thing, against the deep grain of the whole world of that age, and she did it with a will, and the men of crew took her as one of their own. And aboard that same ship, dressed as a man among men, was another Mary Read, an Englishwoman, whose whole strange life had been a thing of disguise. From a child she had been dressed and raised as a boy, for hard reasons of poverty and inheritance that are a long story in themselves, and she had carried the disguise on into her grown life, had served, it is said, as a soldier in the armies of Europe, fighting in men's clothes in men's wars, and then gone to sea, still in disguise, still living as a man in a man's world, until the ship she sailed on was taken by pirates, and she, like so many, joined them. And aboard's ship, the two women came to know each other, and to know each other's secret, and to stand together, two women in a world of men, keeping their own counsel, fighting when fighting came. The men in the hold linger longest over the end of it, for the end of it is the part that won these two their immortal name. It came one night off the coast of Jamaica. Sloop lay at anchor, and his crew had been drinking deep and long, the way men drank ashore and should never have drunk at sea, the very thing the articles were written to prevent, and they were sodden, witless, useless with rum, when out of the dark came a king's vessel, sent to hunt them, and laid alongside, and the king's men poured aboard. And his men, the brave, terrible pirates, were too drunk to stand, too drunk to fight, and they fell back and hid themselves below decks like frightened children, all of them, every grown armed man aboard, all but two, the two women. Anne Bonny and Mary Read alone kept the deck. The tales say, alone stood to the fight, calling on the cowering men below to come up and fight like the men they claimed to be. And when no one came, the two of them fought on alone, with cutlass and with pistol, two women against the boarding party, until they were overwhelmed by the weight of numbers and taken at last. It is said that Anne Bonny, allowed to see once before his death, told him to his face that she was sorry to see him there, but that if he had fought like a man, he need not have been hanged like a dog. Whether she truly said it, no one can swear, but it is the kind of thing that fastens to a story and will not come off, because it is too fitting and too fierce and too true to the shape of her to let go of. They were tried, the whole crew, and the men were condemned and hanged, Calico Jack among them. But the two women, when the sentence came, both spoke the same words, both declared that they were with child, both pleaded their bellies, as the old phrase went. For the law would not hang an unborn child for the mother's crime, and so their deaths were stayed. Mary Read did not long outlive the trial. She took a fever in the prison and died there within a few months, and the child, if there was a child, died with her. Anne Bonny's fate is one of the small mysteries of the age. She vanishes from the record after the trial. No hanging, no death noted, simply gone, slipped out of the pages of history into we know not what. And the men in the dark like to think she got away, somehow, and lived, somewhere, to be an old woman by a fire with a secret she never told. No one knows. Perhaps it is better not to know. Two women, in a world that gave women nothing and forbade them everything, who took the sea and the sword and the wild, free outlaw life for their own, and stood to fight on a dark deck when a shipload of men would not. That is the tale, and the men in the hold tell it with a respect they give to few of the men, and then they too fall quiet, and the ship creaks on through the dark. There is something in it that stays with you as the voices fade, not the fighting, but the standing, the two of them alone on the deck in the dark calling for the others to come up, and no one coming, and the two of them fighting on anyway. Carry that quietly down towards sleep, not as a trouble, but as a small fierce warmth, the thought of two souls who would not lie down when the world said lie down, somewhere out on these same dark waters long ago. Chapter 16. The Careening Beach. In the dark you remember the smell of a different night, wood smoke and hot tar, and the green reek of weed drying in the sun, and the strange landlocked stillness of a ship lying on her side on a beach. For there are nights, every few months, when the ship does not sail at all, when she is hauled out of her element entirely and laid over helpless on the sand, and the whole crew goes ashore to do the hardest and most necessary work of the pirate's life. They call it careening, and without it no pirate ship could last a season, and the memory of the last time comes back to you now, lying in the dark, as a thing both dreaded and strangely loved. Here is why it must be done. A ship's bottom down below the waterline where you never see it does not stay clean. From the moment she is launched, the sea begins to colonize her. Weed takes hold and grows in long green streaming beards. Barnacles fasten themselves by the thousand, crusting her hull with rough white shells. And worst of all, in these warm waters, there is a creature, a long pale worm of the sea, the shipworm, that bores its way into the very timber of the hull and tunnels through it, riddling the wood from within, until a plank that looks sound is honeycombed and rotten and ready to fail. All of this fouling grows and grows on the hidden bottom of the ship, and all of it drags at her as she sails, slowing her, weighing her down, until a ship months out of careening may have lost a third of her speed or more to the green beard and the white crust and the boring worm. And for a pirate, speed is life itself. The whole of his trade, the whole of his survival, rests on being faster than what he chases and faster than what chases him, fast to run down the fat merchant ship, fast to flee the king's frigate. A pirate ship that loses her speed is a pirate ship that will soon be caught, and a caught pirate is a hanged pirate. And so, every 2 or 3 months without fail, the ship must be cleaned, and the only way to clean her bottom in a world with no dry dock, no great machine to lift her, is to careen her, to run her gently ashore on a rising tide in some quiet hidden cove, and as the tide falls and leaves her stranded, to haul her over on her side with ropes and tackle made fast to the trees of the shore, until her whole fouled bottom lies exposed to the sky and the men can get at it. And then the work begins, and it is brutal work in the worst heat of the day. The men swarm over the exposed hull with scrapers and tools, hacking and scraping away the weed and the barnacles, the green slime sliding off in sheets, the white shells flying, the long worm-board planks marked for repair. Fires are lit on the beach, and great pots of tar and pitch set bubbling over them, and the claned timber is paid over with the hot black tar to seal it and protect it. The smell of it fills the cove, hot pitch, drying weed, the low-tide reek of the exposed sea bottom, wood smoke, sweat. The men work half-naked and streaming in the tropical heat, cursing and calling, and slowly, plank by plank, the fouled hull comes clean, and when one side is done, the whole ship must be hove over the other way, and the work begun again on the far side. It takes days. It is exhausting and filthy, and it must be done, and the men do it, because the alternative is to grow slow and be caught and hang. But here is the thing the men never say aloud and all of them feel. Careening is the most dangerous time in all a pirate's dangerous life, and they know it in their bones the whole while they work. For a ship hauled over on her side on a beach is a ship that cannot fight and cannot flee. Her guns are useless, pointed at the sand or the sky. Her sails are down. She cannot move. The whole crew is ashore and scattered and busy and unready, their weapons set aside, their attention on the scraping and the tar. If an enemy were to come upon them then, a king's ship, a rival crew, anyone, they would be all but helpless, caught out of their element like a turtle flipped onto its back. And so the careening cove is always chosen with the greatest care. A hidden place, a secret place, a cove screened by islands or guarded by a narrow entrance, where no enemy is likely to find them in the days they lie exposed. Nassau's shallow harbor was prized partly for just this, that a ship could be careened there in relative safety, among friends, with other crews about to give warning. The careening beach is the pirate at his most vulnerable, his armor off, his shell open, trusting to secrecy and to luck for the few hard days the work demands. And yet, and this is the strange thing you remember as you lie in the dark, for all the danger and all the brutal labor, there was a kind of holiday in it too, to be ashore, to feel solid, unmoving ground beneath your feet after weeks of the heaving deck. To swim in the warm, clear water of the cove, to sleep at night on the beach under the palms with a real fire and roasting meat, and the sand still warm from the day, to walk on land, to be still. The body that has lived on a rolling ship for months feels the steadiness of the earth as a kind of miracle, almost a drunkenness. The ground itself seeming to sway for the first day until the legs remember how to stand on a thing that does not move. There was hard work in the days, but there were warm nights on the beach between them, and a roughness of fellowship and rest. And for a little while the great dark dangerous sea was held at arm's length, and the men could lie on the warm solid earth and look up at the stars from below them instead of riding among them. Let that memory carry you now, not the labor of it, but the rest of it, the warm beach and the fire and the solid ground and the body finally still after so long in motion. Imagine lying there on the warm sand under the palms, the careening fires burnt low, the work done for the day, the sea lapping soft and dark at the edge of the cove, and the whole great wheel of stars turning slow overhead. The ship lies quiet on her side in the shallows, half-cleaned, resting too, and you lie on the unmoving earth and feel it hold you steady and sure, and let the long, warm, tropical night settle over the cove, and over the ship, and over you, and draw you down at last towards sleep. Chapter 17. The Sail on the Horizon. There is a sail on the northern horizon, in the tale the older men tell, and it is not a prize, and it is not a friend, it is the end of everything. The men do not often speak of it, the ending that is coming, but on some nights, in the dark, the oldest of them will. For they have lived long enough in this wild free life to feel the shape of it, to sense that a thing so strange and so lawless cannot last forever in a world of kings, and that somewhere over the edge of the years, a reckoning is sailing toward them, slow and certain, under the colors of the crown. And in the tale they tell, it comes to a head at Nassau, the wild, free pirate town, in a single summer, and it comes in the shape of one determined man. His name was Woodes Rogers, and he was no pirate but the very opposite of one, a hard, capable, lawful man, a former privateer himself who knew the sea and knew the breed, sent out from London by the king with a commission to do what no one had yet managed, to take Nassau back, to break the pirate republic, to bring the wild island under the crown's law at last. And he came not only with warships at his back, but with something far cleverer and far more dangerous to the pirates than any cannon. He came with a pardon. The king's pardon, it was called, an offer printed and proclaimed that any pirate who would give up the life and swear to sin no more would be forgiven all his past crimes. Wholly, the rope lifted from his neck, the slate wiped clean, and let go free to live an honest life. Surrender and live. That was the offer. And it cut through the pirate brotherhood like nothing else could have, because it did not ask them to fight, it asked them only to choose, and most of them chose to live. That is the plain truth of it, and there is no shame in it. When the king's ships came into Nassau harbor and Rogers came ashore and proclaimed his pardon, the great mass of the pirates, The 1,000 wild men of the beach, the flying gang, the crews of 100 sloops, looked at the warships and looked at the offer and looked at the lives they were living, lives that nearly all ended young at the end of a rope, and a very great many of them came forward and gave up their arms and swore the oath and took the pardon and became, overnight, honest men again, or at least free ones. The wild republic did not fall in a great battle. It dissolved mostly in a season, as its citizens one by one chose the safe and quiet life over the wild and doomed one. Who can blame them? They had wanted, all along, only to belong to themselves, and here was a way to belong to themselves and live. A few would not. A few of the hardest and proudest and most stubborn looked at the pardon and turned away from it, and slipped out of the harbor before the trap could close, and sailed on into the wild life for as long as it would have them. And one by one, over the next few years, the sea and the law caught up with every one of them. The smoking bearded man would be hunted down and killed in his sandy inlet within months. The splendid tea-drinking Welshman would fall to a king's broadside on the African coast within a few years, and his crew would hang in their scores. The flashy Calico captain and his 2 fierce women would be taken off Jamaica. One by one, the great names of these years were snuffed out, by the gun or by the rope, as the crown threw its whole weight at last against the pirates and would not stop until they were gone. And gone they were soon enough. The thing had only ever been a brief wild flowering, a few short years in the gap between an ending and a beginning, between the Great War that flung thousands of trained fighting sailors loose with no work and no home, and the slow firm closing of the colonial fist that finally brought order to these seas. In that gap, for a handful of years, the wild free outlaw world had bloomed, with its votes and its articles and its careening beaches and its democracy written on a sheet of paper in a ship's cabin. And then the gap closed. The crown sent its governors and its warships and its pardons and its gallows, and the world reached out and gathered these wild edges back into itself, and the pirate age was over almost as quickly as it had begun. But the trade winds did not change. That is the thing to hold on to, lying here in the dark, near the end of the night and near the end of the tale. The wind that fills the sail above you tonight is the very same wind, blowing from the very same quarter, that filled the sails of all of them, the smoking beard and the crimson tea drinker and the 2 fierce women and the 1,000 nameless men of the beach. The stars they steered by are the stars over your head now, unchanged, the low North Star and the Southern Cross and the great glowing road between. The sea still glows with its cold fire in the wake. The islands still stand green above the warm water, heavy with fruit. The world the pirates knew is still here, all of it, the warm wind and the wheeling stars and the patient sea. Only the pirates themselves are gone, swept up and away into history, into legend, into the tales the men tell low in the dark before sleep. The stage remains. The players have left it, and the great warm indifferent sea rolls on through the night exactly as it always has, carrying its ships, whoever sails them, toward whatever morning waits. Let the ending be gentle then. Not a tragedy, not really, only a thing that bloomed and faded, the way all things bloom and fade, the way the day blooms and fades into this very night. The pirates had their few wild years of belonging to themselves, under these stars, on this wind, and then they were gone, and the wind blew on. There is peace in that if you let there be. All things pass, and the great patient world remains and rolls on, and carries us sleeping toward the light. Chapter 18. The Last Watch Before Dawn. The bell again, but softer now, or so it seems, in the deep stillness of the smallest hours. You half-wake to it, far down in sleep, and you count the strokes without meaning to, and you know without thinking what they mean. The watch is changing, out there in the dark above you, for the last time before the dawn. It is the hour the sailors know as the deepest of the night, the hour when the world is most asleep and most still, when the fires of life burn lowest in every living thing. And yet already, though no eye can see it yet, the night has turned, and somewhere far over the eastern edge of the sea the dark has begun, ever so faintly, to thin. Above you the tired men of the middle watch come down at last to their rest, and the fresh men go up to take the deck for the final stretch of the dark, and you hear, half dreaming, the soft sounds of the change, the murmur of low voices, the creak of the ladder, the shuffle of bare feet, men finding their hammocks in the dark, the long contented sigh of a body finally lying down, and then quiet again. The new watch settles to its work above. The ship sails on. And you sink back down toward the deep place you rose from, rocked, warm, safe, with hours of dark still wrapped around you. Up on the deck, in the cool of the last watch, the world is at its most beautiful and most still. The wind has eased a little, the way it often does in the dead of the night, and it blows soft and steady out of the northeast, warm even now, filling the sail with a gentle, constant pressure, and the ship slips along quiet and easy at perhaps 6 knots, no longer racing, just sailing, just making her patient way through the dark toward the morning. The water murmurs along the hull. The wake glows faintly behind her, the cold sea fire dimmer now, trailing away into the dark. And overhead the great wheel of stars has turned, all through the night, slow and silent and sure, so that the patterns that stood in the east at dusk now lean toward the west, and the whole vast clockwork of the sky has carried the night around toward its ending while you slept. The man at the tiller stands easy in the soft amber glow of the binnacle light, the only light on all the dark ship, and he holds her steady on her course, and he watches the stars, and he is alone with the night in the way that only the last watch is alone. There is a peace in this hour that the day never knows. The fear is gone, no enemy hunts in the dead of the night. The sea is empty and the dark is kind. The work is gone, there is nothing to do but hold the course and let the wind do its patient work. There is only the man and the tiller and the stars and the warm wind and the soft hiss of the water and the great calm turning of the world toward the light. He thinks of nothing or of everything or of home in the way a man thinks in the last watch, half dreaming on his feet, and the ship sails on, and the night wears slowly, gently toward its close. And below, in the warm, breathing dark of the hold, the men sleep. All of them now, the whole off-watch, slung in their long row of swinging canvas, rocked all together in the same slow rhythm, breathing deep and even in the dark. The smoking bearded man and the crimson tea drinker and the 2 fierce women and all the great wild names are only stories now, drifted away, gone quiet. The articles are sworn and kept. The watch is set. The course is true. The wind is fair. And 40 tired men, who came to the edge of the world looking for something the world would not give them, and found at least this small wooden country, this rough fellowship, this warm, dark, rocking peace, sleep on through the last of the night, safe in the belly of their quiet ship, far out on the great, warm, patient sea. In the east now very faintly the first grey comes. Not light yet, only the absence of the deepest dark, a thinning, a paling, low on the rim of the world where the sea meets the sky. The stars there begin, one by one, to fade. The man at the tiller sees it, and something in him eases, the way it always eases when the longest part of the dark is past, and the day, however far off still, has become a certainty again. The cook stirs somewhere forward, the first soul to rise, beginning the small early work of the morning, and the ship sails on into the slow coming of the light, carrying her sleeping crew toward another day on the warm green sea. But that day is not yet. That is the gift of this last hour, that the light is coming, but is not yet here, that the morning is certain, but is still a long slow while away, that there is nothing now between you and the dawn but this, the softest and stillest and most peaceful stretch of all the night, the ship sailing easy, the wind blowing warm, the stars fading gentle one by one, and the whole tired, sleeping world rocked safe in the dark, drifting toward the light. So let go now, the last of the way. There is nothing left to do and nowhere left to be but here, in the warm dark, rocked on the long slow swell, the wind soft in the single sail, the wake glowing faint behind, the stars fading one by one in the paling east. The whole long night is behind you. The morning will keep. The ship will sail on without your watching. The wind will blow without your help. The sea will carry you as it has carried sleeping sailors for 10,000 years, gently, surely on through the last of the dark. Rest now. The watch is kept. The course is true. The wind is fair and warm. Sleep and let the ship sail on, out under the fading stars, across the warm and patient sea, toward a morning that is still, and will always be just a little way off over the soft gray edge of the world. Sleep well. The sea has you. The night has you. All is well and all is quiet, and all the long dark holds you safe until the light.